So we have discovered that theology means words about God. What we then need to consider is where do those words come from? So, in other words, we need to consider what are the sources of theology for those words about God. And there are three different sources that I think you'll find in just about every major world religion that constitute the sources for words about God. These are scriptures, tradition or traditions, and human experience. Let's start with scriptures. In just about every major world religion, you will notice that there are some types of texts that are considered to be authoritative, that these texts don't just stand alongside other texts like, I don't know, let's say novels or tracts, but instead, these texts stand as communicating something about God that people wish to make sure that they hand down through every successive generation. They're believed to almost have a kind of divine authority, and that varies from religion to religion, but certainly we can say in the Judeo-Christian religion, for example, that the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament and the New Testament and what we sometimes call Christian scriptures, that those are not just like some regular book. Instead, those books communicate something about God that is authoritative, that people take very seriously, because they believe that God has actually somehow inspired the messages that are found in those texts. We'll talk more about that later in the course. Tradition has to do with how these then get handed down. Because if you think about it, what would then happen is that we find ourselves in new circumstances with new sets of questions, with new challenges. And so communities are always adapting. Communities are always looking, especially religious communities, they're looking back at these ancient traditions, because the scriptures are in fact a form of tradition, but they're looking back at them and they're seeking an answer for how to understand their own lived experiences. And so traditions is how these get adapted. As you can see from the bullet point, how the community adapts the beliefs, customs, values, the priorities that are found to be in the original revelation. And tradition is considered itself to be revelatory. Now, different religious traditions will talk about this differently. So some will look at tradition as not having nearly the same kind of weight or authority as those original scriptures, while others will heavily emphasize that these traditions develop because God continues to speak, because God continues to lead people to understand what God wishes them to know, what God wishes them to follow. The final piece there, human experience, is all essential because it really binds the other two. If you think about it, if something is in Scripture and it doesn't resonate with people's real experience, then why are they going to read it? If you read the Scriptures or you engage in a tradition and you don't find it to be somehow inspiring, somehow communicative to you as to who God is and what God wishes for you, if you don't find that, then you're not going to follow these scriptures or these traditions, and therefore they're going to end up becoming part of the dust heap of human history. So human experience is what brings it to life in our day and age, and as you can see in the slide there, it's how individuals encounter divine presence. Does this ring true, or does it not, or do I look at it differently? So these are the three sources for our words about God.